Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming, and yes, more new Wilds information. Just this morning, there was this half-an-hour gameplay of the Scarlet Forest shown, a live showing of two different saves, showing tons of different areas in the forest, loads of information that we're going to break down in a really detailed way for this video. It's a lot, so we're just going to begin. We start in the Windward Plains base camp. Here we get some new icons and interaction options we've just not seen. In the version I played, the NPCs were in the base camp, but I couldn't talk to them. Here we obviously could with the icons that allow for it, for a canteen, a shop, the smithy, but we are wondering, there's no melder around, right? It didn't look like it, so maybe you unlock that later. We open here right before the dawn though, just before sunrise, which I think is the first time we're seeing that. The discovery mechanic is shown to be back though. You first see something and it highlights it and names it for you, like this wing drake in this moment. Also confirmed shortly after this, decorations are coming back as hunt rewards, as shown on the right, under the rewards for hunting X monsters on this list. It seems to confirm RNG decorations again though. The Balahara one rewarded more decorations than the rest, as an example, and this again shows the whole investigation style setup they have for the hunt options, seemingly always. If we have RNG decorations again though, that suggests we'll go back to craftable talisman you'd think, while decorations are going to be back to RNG. During the translation livestream with Jono and Joe though, they talked about how this footage we're seeing is on PlayStation 5. Obviously, it's a massive topic. People are worried about the optimization, especially for PCs. In an interview that occurred around this time we're going to cover later, some questions about this were answered. It was said that they're still discussing the full details of performance mode, and this does not represent the final version's quality. When the final version is actually ready, they'll give us those details, but in a follow-up question about this from the interviewer, they said again they need more time before they can finalize the specific parameters for the game's performance. All of that is to say that they're very aware of people being concerned about performance, and it is a priority. Alright, back to the hunt though. We have a quematrice hunt start here, very chicken-like indeed. I mentioned before with its design how it has a chicken head comb, but it's also the behavior. It's kind of pecking at the ground like a fire chicken basically. Apparently this is the smallest brute wyvern yet, but as a carrion eater, it's still going to be very aggressive with other monsters, but maybe not always to its favor. Speaking of which, we see a little talioth nest here. So as you can see, the small monsters bombard this bigger monster despite the size difference, knocking it down. Using these smaller monsters to your advantage then seems great, like they're a living trap. The fight doesn't go on for long though. We now get a showcase of seamless travel between regions. We have this encounter in the Windward Plains, and then via Area 10 the hunter heads through this narrow passage to the next map. It's a tight environment with random consumables to get, but you're basically passing through a long corridor, giving the game a chance to subtly deload the Windward Plains and then load the Scarlet Forest. At least that's my assumption. This is a pretty clever way to do this, while making the world feel very connected and real. I think it's well done. We don't know how the other locales are going to work with this, but at very least, Windward Plains, Scarlet Forest, these are connected. As we enter, you can see how the map shifts its color to blue when you enter the water area for Area 2, which is pretty cool. We also see a familiar layered section from the trailer as they go up here, right past the Lala Barina, and at the top of this path, there's just another Barina that they begin to fight, so they're really common, it would seem. We get from the translation that the water is very red here because we're actually in the period of fallow during this starting gameplay, and that changes as we go. Though as we travel between areas, we see another discovery of a new small monster. Those are the small monsters we saw during trailer 4, and it was Joe Bustos during the translation stream that they're apparently called Pirika or something like that. He didn't seem 100% certain himself, but they are confirmed to be at least small leviathans after all. According to Joe though, they swim in packs, they swarm monsters that are hurt, but they'll also swarm you if you're hurt too. So basically, if they sense blood, they go for it. As we fight this Lala Barina, we do get an initial sneak attack for the greatsword. I think that's the first time we've seen that. And during this fight, we also see how this greatsword has blue sharpness. There's a notch on it that probably indicates when it's going to drop to green, and it's a nice visual update. This also suggests purple and white, and that should look good too. For some quick notes about Lala then, even though we plan a more detailed follow-up for the monsters as a video, we see how it uses these florets to create little clouds of flowers. These paralyze those that touch them. So if you touch multiple in a row, you're going to be stunned. It's not the first one, but yeah, it happens quick. Later though, we see the hunter clearing them by shooting them with a bowgun. So we assume you can do the same with melee weapons to clear them. But when you do touch them, you get a debuff above your health bar, and then when you're stunned, there's now a timer counting down to let you know how long you're stunned for, at least for the moment. But yeah, these do also seem to stun other monsters, as we see later. Other details here are the spinning nature of Lala, as she's designed around being a ballerina, or the way she uses a stinger needle to thrust into you during the enrage. During this, the hunter lands a blow and it automatically creates a quest to hunt this specific Lala, which is just a cool mechanic to see. And also, we see the palico help out the hunter at one point by delivering a vigor wasp heal, which is nice to have back. We then transition to a new area, luring the Lala to another monster, which is a doshaguma. The map is open for the first real time during this. You can see the ground level of the forest here and how it's mostly small areas with tons of connected corridors. This would suggest a higher area count compared to other maps, since there are tons of them. We do get to see the full turf war though between Lala Barina and doshaguma, and Lala jumps onto its back, which looks horrible in itself, but amazingly Dosha grabs a leg, slams it onto the ground, and begins absolutely pounding it in a 3-part combo. This is actually overall a trade though, because even though it looks like doshaguma wins, they both took damage. This tells us that Dosha and Lala are considered relatively equal level monsters. We can take from that in regards to the Windward Plains power level. That starts with Chatacabra, then you got Dosha in the middle, Ray at the top. Meanwhile, the forest, by comparison, we're going to see that we have Congalala, then above that Lala Barina, and then above that Uth Duna at its top. So interesting power comparisons. Finally, a little note about Lala here is that her flower comes out seemingly during the enraged state, where she becomes way faster and more aggressive. Here she sends out tons of those falling status flowers, stabs with the stinger aggressively, dancing around a lot more. At this point, the devs confirmed that you can break that stinger off, meaning she can't use it anymore, and maybe you get the parts for it, but you'll also need to have her enraged actually have the chance to do that. Lastly, for this save section though, we move to Lala Barina's unique nest, which is down in Area 4, as it turns out. It's a little cave that's filled with her flowery web and is very atmospheric, very cool, and considering the fact that she's not the apex predator of this locale after all, this highlights the potential that each monster may have its own unique nest and unique mechanics at those nests, which obviously Lala Barina definitely has here. I should also mention that the devs on Voice talked about a really cool mechanic. Apparently killing monsters will leave a body behind, which will eventually decompose and leave the classic bone piles, which yes, will be lootable when it fully reaches that state, which is pretty neat. After the end of the first planned route then, we load out and back into a new setup. This means we get a look at our current title screen with our current loadout, which is cool to see, but it also means we get a look at their new save select screen. Here we have 2 saves they're going to drop between, and both hunter rank levels of 43 at that time. Apparently this is just set up for the demo and is not an accurate representation of what rank we'll be at when we first go to the Scarlet Forest. In any case, it's pretty cool to see on the screen that we have the seikret standing with us, but importantly, this seikret looks completely different in its colouring. This does confirm again seikret customization in a new way. We did see with the deluxe edition that there was cosmetics you might choose to buy, but here we do have one that's totally different to that. It's kind of a yellowish white with red ends. And they've done this probably to match the Lala set. They've got the hunter and palico in now. So we must be at least able to change the colouring for ourselves without buying anything. Loading to this new save then, we have the SNS, and they're using a Lala Barina setup. This is basically a fancy looking rapier that probably emulates the stinger that Lala uses. And this does also appear to be a little base camp in the Scarlet Forest. Here we have the researcher with a special talk symbol, probably to progress something with them. Just like the palico has an exclamation point here too. We are wondering if the side quest related to Uth Palico because of that. This new save though, it actually begins during the downpour, a time of inclemency in the Scarlet Forest. This means it's possible to find the apex predator, Uth Duna, as we soon will. On the way to that, we see the hunter has a new blue pod of some kind. We are wondering if that's to do with the new wing drakes, maybe you can take that from them and create maybe piercing pods or something like that. But eventually we reach Uth Duna, who is found during the downpour in Area 10 in this case. We plan to cover the monsters in full detail like I said, but here you can see the way that she's shifting the water and creating waves that echo out even after basic movement, let alone her attacks, which is super cool. It could be wise to lure pod her to like a drier area to not have to deal with this. But if not, maybe there's a skill in game now that will help you deal with higher waters or something. During this encounter, there's lots of mechanics shown, like a clash with Uth, it looks amazing. But during that, there's an accidental hit on a small monster. That triggers paralysis on it, which very likely is not because of Uth, but because the hunter is using the Lala Barina SNS, confirming something we see again later, that Lala Barina weapons have paralysis on them, as makes sense. During the fight though, we do see the stamina bar begin to flash blue, which likely means water blight, as you might expect from a monster like that. Apparently though, it takes very little time for the time of plenty to occur in this save. The storm breaks, suddenly everything becomes quite beautiful, as well as the water level going down. So her wave-related mechanics are probably a lot lessened in this case. But before we can really see something like that, the hunter opens up the map to look at Congalala, previously confirmed already, but good to see. And in this moment, the quest for Congalala popped up the moment the period turned to plenty. So maybe Congalala only shows up during periods of plenty based on that information. On the way there then, we have a couple cool things, like these carnivorous plants that eat other endemic life. A bird lands onto its open mouth, it snaps closed, pretty brutal. On the way then, the hunter begins to transfer from the base ground map to the much more vertical above region, the canopy of the forest, by following a familiar vine path we saw in the trailer. You can see on the minimap that these areas are highlighted, while the below areas are still there, just darker and less visible, showing the difference in height, but giving you an indicator of where you currently are on the below map. Up here, we'd expect to find flying monsters like yians, but instead of continuing up and finding something like that, they jump off and glide down to area 8 and 7. Around this point, something interesting happens. They open the map to aim at Congalala, show some kind of unknown icon on the map in area 12. This is very likely to be the wudwud hideout location. When they teleport to that later, it looks very similar to that icon. There seems to be two versions of it though, a ground level and an above level, and we'll look at that later in the hideout. This then brings us to the Congalala encounter, where, yeah, congas are confirmed as we expected. The nest area for Congalala, though, appears to be revealed here. It's this massive wall of dripping honey, a hive swarm of bees that the congas seem to be fine with. The Congalala's awesome, though. Very familiar in an updated way. There's the classic sleeping animation. His swings cause him to flail and fall over. We see him eat a mushroom, and then he begins to spew out the status of poison breath because of that. The hunter drags the Congalala into a new area, though, where there's endemic life. You can use your grapple to break, causing a hornet's nest to spew out and send hornets flying at nearby targets, like the Congalala. This takes the aggro of the monster briefly for just a few attacks while it deals with them, so this does give you some DPS time. Further here though, we get to see other kinds of breath attacks, like the explosive ones. He pulled the explosive mushroom to consume for that out of nowhere though, instead of having to find one. It was highlighted by the devs that the shape and size of the breath depends on the mushroom type consumed though, so the breath types and sizes, they're going to change. But you can still expect the classic stuff like normal breath attacks with no mushrooms, or yes, the fart attack when you go behind them. Super interestingly though, the hunter suddenly opens up the map and teleports out mid-combat. So with fast travel being used mid-combat, this seems like a pretty crazy trick to avoid being carted. Kind of overpowered in concept. It's being said that this could be used for the demo version only though. We have no idea if that's going to be in the full game. Now during that menu pull up to do that, we also get a look at these research style drawings on the left, on the side. Here we can see a very clear sketch of Uth Duna, right? But above that, there's more things that are new, like a giant snake wrapping around something. It's hard to tell whether that's endemic life here, or like a full-on snake wyvern monster that's yet to be revealed. And another drawing that looks kind of like a bird wyvern, but it doesn't look like Yian Kutku either. So yeah, a lot to suggest from those images. Moving forward though, with this teleport, we find the hunter actually high up in a new area, in an upper level of the map. This gives us a nice look at the high up pathways and what to expect on the canopy. Lots of pathways that lead long between different sections. They're looking like floating islands with smaller areas. Though this water section for Area 17 does look massive and looks awesome overall. Before we go there, the hunter goes into the tent for a moment and there's this cute passive interaction with the palico. The hunter's sharpening a knife and the palico pretends to take a cut while trying to look at it. That freaks the hunter out. The palico reveals it's just a prank, bro. It's not serious, it's silly, but it's nice to get that kind of passive life to the characters, and I imagine there's going to be a lot of animations to play out. But also in this tent, there is a cage, possibly to show off endemic life. We're wondering if you display stuff here in your tents instead of like your proper room in a village with the changes in wilds. We'll see on that one. Also during this moment, the devs confirmed something via voice, that apparently Congalala can now dig up special mushrooms called truffle de conga, which it can eat for new special moves. But if you interrupt that and take the mushroom for yourself, you can cook it for bonus effects at the barbecue, which is pretty cool. Alright, back to what we're doing. The hunter jumps down into Area 17 next, which is where we see the confirmation of another small monster, the gazelle. So that big fish is back. We get to see some fishing, possibly big game fishing, which was referenced before. Here we see some fishing done at the outer bounds water with a quick normal fish, but then there's a bigger fish they target, which when attempted to catch has new mechanics, where they're trying to land the lure and maintain the minigame to keep the fish caught, slowly reel it in until eventually it's dragged out. So obviously there's going to be harder fishing and easier fishing, and apparently there's going to be local fish for each locale, so you know if you're hunting something specific, it needs to be in the right locale. Something Something Josh brought up with me about this area though is how big and impressive and wide it is. For nothing to be shown here in the gameplay or trailer is suspicious. Josh is saying that he thinks this could be the nest for Uth Duna. It could be here where we saw Uth Duna jumping in and out of bounds, generating this barrage of waves. So this could be its special nest, this big location, and it makes sense. But next then, we're nearly at the end. We begin to teleport to a new location. But in this list, we can see different icons. There's the base camp and portable camps with similar icons, but this green icon is the one we saw earlier on the map. This is the fast travel location for the wudwud hideout. It's pretty cool in here. One of them looks obsessed with Congalala. He's on a pile of its fur and wearing an outfit of it. And it looks like you could have a conversation with different wudwuds around this place. The devs do confirm that you can exchange items with the wudwuds to trade. They like to collect, so they like items specifically, encouraging your exploration and collection. And we're going to find wudwuds all around the map rather than just the hideout, though apparently they're going to be hard to find. Shortly after this, the hunter does exit the side of the hideout and begins climbing to a roof where there's a cooking campfire set up. At night, the wudwuds slowly come up here for a special event. The fire eventually lights and a new icon appears over one of the wudwuds, maybe the leader. But that's where the showcase kind of ends. They start to stare at the sky instead. During this time, they tell us that you will see shooting stars in the sky, and they tell us that if you give food to the wudwuds here, they'll do the equivalent of kind of a motley mix food service, so that's probably what this section is for. But yeah, that's the end of everything. That's our really in-depth look at the Scarlet Forest gameplay, everything we learned from all of it. If there's anything you guys spotted we didn't mention, please let us know, but I hope this was educational in a way that was useful. For now then, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.